7 people aged 13 to 24 are diagnosed with cancer every day.
On the 11th of June 2020, I was one of the 7.
4 days later, on the 15th of June 2020, I too was one of the 7.
And that brings with it a whole host of challenges.
These are the stories of what happens afterwards.
This is AfterThoughts.
The teenage years. Welcome to another episode of Afterthoughts, The Teenage Years, hosted by myself, hello, Shaumya.
Hi everyone.
And today in the producer's, is it throne we've decided to call it, is Alice.
I mean, I'm very, very happy for it to be called a throne. Yes, hello, I am here.
So we've just finished talking to the lovely Connor. What an episode, what a storyteller. Shaumya, thoughts?
Aiden, God, mispronouncing my name on the podcast.
Heavens to Betsy, that's a sackable offence, isn't it?
The absolute scenes. Shaumya thinks that Connor was wonderful. I just thought his openness was brilliant. Just a really great storyteller, and I loved how there were just little moments of lightness through basically every story he told us.
Before we dive in, Toby's not here, but we'll keep diving in. Before we dive into that, though, I want to just take a moment to talk about Scottish snacks, because we touched on it very, very briefly with Connor. I feel like we could have gone into more detail. Shaumya, tell us about your favourite Scottish snacks.
We could have had a little spin-off podcast with Connor, couldn't we? Something to think about in the future. I love everything Tonics. I have a Tonics bubble hat, I have a Tonics mug, I have the Tonics tea cake. I'm just obsessed, adore the things. They're also vegetarian, so Toby, you can get munching on a Tonics tea cake. What other Scottish snacks do we like? I'm actually not a haggis fan.
Oh, I've never had haggis. Aiden, have you ever had haggis before?
I have, and I think I was just, I didn't really have an opinion on it. I was just sort of there like, it's all right.
A bit underwhelming, I think. But a deep fried Mars bar, my verdict is, having had one bite of one, they're quite sickly, and you need, like with an apple crumble, you'd have like cream or ice cream or custard. You need something like that, but it literally can have basically no sugar in, because the deep fried Mars bar itself is so sickly.
It's quite cloying, isn't it?
Yeah.
I want to just also go back to the Tonics tea cake. I don't know if my mother-in-law listens to the podcast, but I'm banned from eating Tonics tea cakes in their house because I once fell asleep with a Tonics tea cake in my hand in her house. This was when I was really young. But when you go to sleep with a Tonics tea cake in your hand, all of the marshmallow melts and it becomes like a flat disc of like marshmallow biscuit, chocolate marshmallow biscuit. But I woke up in the morning, I still had it in my hand, I opened it and I ate it. So I don't really know what her problem was, to be honest.
I thought you were going to say it had like made a mess of the sofa or something, but no, fantastic.
No.
Well, the way my Scottish friends have told me I'm to eat them is you flip the tea cake over, so you hold like the marshmallow bit, and then you like chomp down that way. But I always go, nibble around the marshmallow chocolate, eat the marshmallow, eat the biscuit.
Well.
I've never understood like special ways of eating stuff, because surely at the end of the day it ends up in your gob anyway.
I'm so pernickety, like anything and everything. But yes,
all gets digested the same, doesn't it?
The only one I agree with is with cupcakes. You cut them in half and then flip it, so it's like an icing sandwich.
Interesting. On that note, shall we head on in to Connor's stories? Because I feel like Connor's stories are probably a lot more interesting than our chat about Scottish snacks.
Sure.
I don't know, Alice.
It's hard to say, but I'm just putting it out there that that's probably more in line with what the listeners are here for.
I'm going to be the final vote and say, yes, Connor's stories are definitely more interesting. Let's head to them. So, welcome, Connor. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. Where are you tuning in from?
I am tuning in from Aberdeen.
And just so she doesn't feel left out, Shaumya, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. The sun's shining. I'm a little bit hay fevery, but hopefully you can't hear that.
No, you can't hear it, actually. You sound all right.
You know when you get the fear about being nasally, though? That's like, I have like decongested before I've come on. So you all need to know that, obviously.
It's very kind of you to decongest on the for the listeners'
Just like
ear
to treat them.
pleasure.
Yeah, I have the beauty of no longer coughing for the past sort of 3 weeks, so I don't have to mute myself just to cough anymore. Yay!
Huzzah! Huzzah! And I feel like we should talk about the drink that Connor is drinking because it's very orange and very appropriate.
Yep, I'm having a nice glass of iron brew. Yeah.
As you should, with the
True.
2 litre bottle next to it.
It's more a goblet than a glass. It's a
Oh, it's
chalice.
Yeah. It's originally for beer, but I thought, iron brew would do. Yeah.
But what I need to know is what you think iron brew tastes like as a Scotsman, because I feel that there's a lot of debate around this one.
Like, nobody can get, like, an actual, like diagnosis on it, like, what it actually tastes like. I've heard some people say, like, candy floss, and I've heard, like, other people say it's like sherbet. It's, like, hard to decide.
Right,
Don't know.
yeah.
I'm kind of going towards candy floss, I think.
Yeah, no, you gotta get behind the Scottish like food and drink. I love a tonics tea cake, love a caramel wafer. I know someone that lives near the tonics factory. Everyone, big claims to fame.
Oh,
you
do they get like the smells?
You can smell the marshmallows. Yeah.
And just for our listeners, the reason why Shaumya knows so much about Scotland but does not sound Scottish at all is because where are you tuning in from, Shaumya?
From Glasgow. Don't keep that in.
You might get lynched for that.
Yeah, I was pretty
From
convinced it's
Glasgow,
Sindri.
That's like when Toby does his impressions of my Yorkshire accent, and I'm like, dude, stop it now. That's
Like,
abysmal.
Righty-o. I think we should get on into our quick fire questions without further ado. So, Connor, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Connor, what are your pronouns?
I go by he/him.
And Connor, who do people say you look like?
Probably my younger brother. He's sort of grown to look like me, so I said taller. It's kind of upsetting. He kind of got the tall genes.
I relish the fact that I am like half an inch taller than my elder brother. Yeah, it's great. What was the last song you listened to?
Hold on. I was listening to music before I came in. I think it was Iron Man by Black Sabbath.
Nice. I've got a friend up here who very much not my taste, but he's a big Black Sabbath Idols fan. I've been, I should say, subjected to quite a lot of it. But nice. What's your favourite pasta shape?
Probably penny, like just the tube.
And why is that your favorite pasta shape? I need to know.
See, it's because you can get the sauce in it, so it kind of packs a bit of flavor. If you're just eating dry pasta, it's just horrible. Yeah.
Fair enough. Good, great reason. What's one thing you can't leave the house without? And that's assuming that you have your keys, wallet, and phone with you already.
Probably my AirPods. Usually, if I'm just walking about, I've got them in.
And next, what's something you'd love to learn?
I'd love to learn another language, like that, or sign language, maybe, because I think it can be helpful.
Yeah, thinking about that career-patient interaction.
Yeah.
You know what I recently learned about sign language is that there's American Sign Language and British Sign Language, and I don't understand why. Why?
They just want to be different.
Yeah, I've been learning sign language this year, and I think it's mainly the grammar and how in British Sign Language you cut a lot of words out and kind of let people string them together. But then with American, just the order's slightly different with things, I think. Yeah, there you go. Little nugget of wisdom for the listeners.
Connor, the question that has divided us all. Firstly, I know I'm going to get hate for saying it like this, but scones, you might say scones, whatever. You put the jam first or the cream first?
See, I was going to say I put the butter on first and then the jam. I don't really use cream with mine.
Hang on. So technically, out of jam and cream, the jam is placed on first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that is 2-2. Let's go.
Yeah, but we've all agreed that cream is the butter. So if you had to use cream, Connor, where are we putting it?
Probably the cream first, but I don't want to like start a fight now. It's like
Oh, the fight's already started, Connor.
There are
You're
things in
just
motion
helping
that
the
cannot be
cause.
undone now. Gosh, Shaumya
Aiden's
planting
like,
that
"Please me."
seed. He'd said his first. I say we go with the first answer.
No, because
Personally,
you basically just put words into his mouth, and you can't.
So
do
did
that.
you.
You are storytellers.
I'll exchange butter for cream. Yeah, try that next time you make a banoffee pie, Shaumya. See how that goes.
Okay, Aiden. We're talking about scones, not scones. Scones. Thank you very much.
Scones.
And lastly, but less controversial, can you just give us a quick, like, 2-line kind of summary of your diagnosis?
Can do. I was diagnosed with testicular cancer on 22nd of December 2017, which metastasized to both my lungs and a lymph node somewhere in my back.
We're also used to telling the story of how we got sat down and told we had cancer, but this section explores beyond that. This is beyond a diagnosis.
Cool. So after I received the 4 months of chemo and then had the final kind of what I thought would be the final surgery, which was getting my testicle removed. The hope was that all the other tumors would shrink because the testicle one was the primary tumor. So I was kind of left in this limbo of feeling of like we had to. It was all just a waiting game. So like you kind of become like impatient because you're waiting all this time after through the chemo and that you're kind of just wanting it just to end. So I waited for about a year. I just stayed at home. I didn't want to start anything because I had that fear of that if I started something and then the cancer came back, I'd have to start back at square one, and that anytime like it could just come back. So for that year, I kind of just tried to work out where my next steps were. I started back up my volunteering at the scouting. I kind of helped me build up my social skills again because I was just not leaving the house during the chemo. And then eventually I started going back to the gym. It kind of helped me build up my strength in that because the end goal was kind of to try and get me to get back to a bit of where I was before the cancer. We weren't sure how long we were going to be waiting for because we were just waiting for these tumors to shrink. And after every single appointment and every single chest x-ray, it wasn't going as fast as the doctors were hoping. So my boss at work called because they gave me like a meeting every 6 months. And after the last 6 months meeting, she was like, look, at some point you just got to jump off the waterfall and get back into work. And I was like, weird way to phrase it, but yeah, I'll come back. So they started me back on a temporary basis. So I'd only do about 6 hours a day. So I'd just be sitting on the tills, which kind of helped me again socialize to try and build it back up by seeing customers and that. But so I found through that, it kind of like brought me back to a point where I felt comfortable to start looking into my future. So I applied to college because I was trying to work out because I knew I didn't want to go back to the computing I was studying at uni. So I had a look at the university websites and there was a course called radiography. And after I looked through like all the aspects of radiography, I saw there was like what the requirements were and that, and I was like, do you know what? I've had plenty of x-rays, I could probably do that. So I applied back to college to get all the sciences I needed to try and do something until I figured out what my next steps were. So I ended up studying HNC in applied sciences. Once kind of the limbo ended, I eventually got a PET scan and they saw there was uptake in the last tumor in my lung. So the idea was to try and remove either the lobe of the lung where it was or just to remove the tumor. Luckily, the managed just to remove the tumor, so I didn't lose like an entire portion of my lung. But so that kind of ended the limbo. But then as soon as like that happened, I recovered. It was like a month away from the pandemic starting, so it's kind of like bad timing.
This next section looks at the collateral that cancer takes on us, our friends, and our family. This is those around us.
When I was first diagnosed, I went to see the oncologist, and the man who was with me was my grandfather. He had the unfortunate job of being the first person to like pick me up and tell me it was going to be okay and to take me home right after I was told. So it was kind of weird. About 2 years later, I was coming home from seeing a gig. I came home about 11 at night, and both my parents were still up. And I was like, "Oh, hello, yeah, I made it home." All right. Well, yeah. So your grandfather's went and got a test done for bowel cancer, and it came back positive. I was like, "All right, um, that's kind of yeah." So because I was getting back so late, I kind of hoped it was kind of a dream. uh, I didn't. It was just like I can't believe this is happening again to someone else, because I guess it gave me that unique perspective of what my family felt when I was going through it. Luckily, he just lives down the street from me, so the next day me and my dad took me over to just go see him, and he kind of seemed how I seemed at the start, like kind of reserved. He wanted to just he wasn't quite sure what was going to happen in that, but he seemed in high spirits. He was using himself. He was mostly upset he wasn't getting to drink his iron brew as much, because after his surgery, anytime he drank the fizz would obviously make his stomach kind of hurt. So he was kind of banned from it. So he had to open the tins up and then wait for them to go flat before he drank it. So when I got my surgery to remove the tumor in my lung, he also had to get surgery to remove the affected part of his bowel. And so during that, I remember the night before I was to get done, he was also to get done the day after me. If that makes sense. So I remember FaceTiming him while he was at home with my auntie and my granny, and we were like trying to compare each other's situations. And I was like, I think I'm gonna get a bigger scar than you. And he was like, "Oh, that's 2 points." And then he was like, "Well, I'm gonna have to get a catheter put in." I'm like, that's 3 points. That's not good. So when I went to go see him in the hospital, we were still playing that silly game, and I think it kind of helped both of us get through it. Luckily, he's all clear now. He's still getting checkups, but I always remember having him with me during that first thing, and he managed to pick me up. So.
Some of the impacts that cancer can have aren't so obvious for us to see. This section explores the invisible impacts.
I remember as soon as I got that first round of chemo in the Teenage Cancer Trust ward, that I had a panic attack. As soon as that was when the first one happened, I remember just feeling scared. I thought it was a reaction to the chemo at first, that I was just not able to breathe. It was like the first time I've ever felt that my body was just not in control, like I wasn't able to do anything about it. So I thought it was just a one-time thing from that. But when I got home, I was constantly there was a few times where I'd eaten too quickly or eaten something hot and I'd just have a panic attack, or I'd be worrying about something, I'd just get a panic attack. There was a point where the ambulance was called to make sure that it wasn't a reaction to anything. So anytime that I felt like I was getting put into a social situation I didn't want, I'd have again the panic attacks. So yeah, it was something that if you were to look at me, you wouldn't assume that was going to happen. I was kind of more looking at the physical side of things. I didn't feel like my mental health was important at that point, and I just thought, I'm fine, I can get on with it. But obviously my mum was able to see things that I wasn't seeing, because she's always been good at telling me how I felt. I think there was a dark moment that kind of pushed her for me to talk to someone, where I said something along the lines of, because there was that uncertainty if the treatment was going to work, or if how I was going to be after it. So I said, what is the point in going through all this if if it's not going to get any better. So I think at that point she wanted me to talk to someone. So I think that's why she pushed it. But she's always been good at telling how I felt. Quite fortunately, while I was staying in the wards, there was a psychologist who would do rounds to make sure everyone was okay. My mum kind of pushed for me to talk to her because I'm not really one for kind of sharing like that kind of side of me back then. I now just get on with it. But yeah, so when she came in, and she'd obviously had heard from one of the nurses that I was suffering from panic attacks while at home, and she quite nicely just explained what a panic attack was, which is your body trying to respond. It was like back, like used to be like it's an evolutionary thing where like your body kind of is getting used to like kind of shutting down the non-essential systems to try and like fight off something. So that's what that was. So it was kind of like she explained that to me, and then I got a whole bunch of like techniques to try and like calm myself down. So it's like name 5 things in a room, 5 things you can hear, 5 things you can see, 5 things you can touch. And I've kind of used those to this day because I still have anxiety issues. I still have talking in public, so issues, just like getting into social situations. Sometimes I get nervous, so I still use those to this day to try and calm myself down. But I've helped out a few times with the Teenage Cancer Trust's Not Okay campaign, where like we're pushing for more of that like psychological help, because it was always kind of like a taboo, like growing up. It was kind of like, you're depressed, just find a way to get happy and stuff like that. It's like it'll pass, but it's one of these things that you just can't like quite get over without like some help. So I feel like I'm more open about it because I'm obviously helping out like studying healthcare and that, and I've seen like people who have like a wide variety of these issues, and that if you're not like honest about it yourself, then you're just gonna fall into a pit. So I know that if I need more support, I can go to my uni to try and like get some help. But I'm quite open about how I feel nowadays. It's yeah, I feel like more open as a person through after all the treatment and that.
That's so lovely to hear, because yeah, like I say, I think that should be how it is for everyone all the time. But it's not always the case. So yeah, big shout outs to your uni, who sound great as well. Is it Aberdeen you're at?
It's Robert Gordon University.
Oh, okay. Big shout out. I think it's important when we tell these stories to not just be like, now everything's fine and I never have any issues ever.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I think so many people going through it, you focus so much on the physical side that you forget your mental health exists. And hopefully, people listening to this will take that as inspiration to actually, what, just because I'm going through so much physically doesn't mean that I should neglect that mental side. Being a teenager is hard as it is. Being a teenager with cancer is 10 times harder. This is Teenage Kicks.
So yeah, like anytime, well, because I've not had anyone in my family, like close remote family. I've had a third cousin who had testicular cancer, but I've not had anyone close to me get cancer. It was kind of like I kind of always had the thing of you'd see it, but you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna get it. It's not happening to me. Like it's like you see it on the news, like something like this celebrity's got cancer. It's like, not gonna happen to me. So I knew the signs of like the basic signs of cancer, just like pain and that, but I wasn't really sure about like the confidence of saying this could be that. This could be cancer. I need to go find someone and get help. So that's why I kind of put off over a year of the symptoms I was seeing, because I just thought I was just playing it up in my head. So I remember telling my mate while I was in high school, we were just like in the shop, and I was just like, I don't know how it came up. I'm like, oh yeah, one of my balls is bigger than the other one. And he was like, mate, you got cancer. And we just laughed it off. Yeah, he was right. But yeah, I'm not sure why that came about. But yeah, so I kind of knew the signs, but I just didn't think it'd happen to me. I was kind of experiencing pains over the couple of weeks in my testicle, and it was like causing me just like have like kind of groin pain. I just couldn't stand. I was in pain. So I remember being in class and the pain being that unbearable. I wasn't paying attention to the lectures and that. So I remember going to my car, texting my dad, something's wrong. He's like, what? And I was like, yeah. So he called me because he was panicked. And I was like, this is what's happening. He's like, we'll call NHS 24, see what happens. And the guy there just told me to go to my GP. And I think after like crying in my car, being like, it's cancer, it's cancer, it's cancer, because I've put it off for so long, and back in my mind, I was like, this is probably cancer. But I just didn't have the confidence to say something about it or to do something about it, because I thought I was just playing it up in my head, and it wasn't going to be that. So I remember just crying in my car for ages before I went into my lecture and then drove straight back home to my GP. Obviously, there's quite a stigma about like being open about, your private parts, your balls, your dicks, your fannies, all that stuff. It's kind of like I was just embarrassed to talk about it, because if you tell someone at high school, it's like, oh, my boss bring another one, you just get bullied. So it was kind of, yeah. And I also didn't really feel like, showing it off to my dad, asking him about it. So I kind of kept it in for a while. My dad's very caring. He's always been kind of like the person in the family you go to if you need something like solved, or like a problem. If I need like help with something, I always text him if I need advice about stuff. So at that point, I was like, I feel like he'd know what to do, because I wasn't sure who else to turn to, and I didn't want to scare my mum. So obviously, I was kind of hoping that he'd have like, he had that common, like I imagine, because obviously he's also got the same, anatomy, that if it was like something like I knocked it or that, he'd be like, just stop. But no, luckily he told me to call to NHS 24, because I never feel scared asking him stuff, but depending on what it is. But I think he was just worried I got someone pregnant. So like, I mean, it kind of better from that.
In this brand spanking new section, Evolutions, we explore how cancer can shape where we go in life and what we go on to do.
So before I got diagnosed, I was doing NC computing in Falkirk, which was a Stirling University course taught in Falkirk, which was, kind of a nightmare to drive to every day, but it was fine. So through that, I did computing at high school, but all the way through it, I just scraped through. I don't know how I managed to get as far as I did. I know nothing about computers, and my friends always tease me about it. They're like, you studied computing. And I'm like, I don't have to fix this. They always tease me about it. So, yeah, so from that, luckily, but like I say luckily, I was going to say luckily I got cancer, but it's not really like a luckily thing. But luckily, it kind of, through me being diagnosed, I found radiography, because it was like on Christmas Day, the tumor on my lung kind of erupted, so I was coughing up blood on Christmas. So I was sent to the hospital. My dad drove us straight to A&E, and I got a CT scan. And through talking to the guy at the CT scanner, I was just chatting with him, the radiographer in there. He was like, "Oh, it's all right, bud. I also had testicular cancer." I was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was and that was about 20 years ago, and I'm still here. And I got a plastic nut, but like I'm still here." And I was like, "Oh, that's pretty." I was kind of comforting to see someone else who's went through it. Yeah. So after like I've had so many X-rays of my chest, like CT scans, like kind of I've had ultrasounds as well, and a PET scan. I was kind of like, do you know what? This is kind of a industry to look at. So I've always been a big fan of like medical dramas and that. And when like you kind of like want to be the doctor in there to like kind of like make the diagnosis and that, and like you want to help out people. So I've always like been a helpful person. So through that, I kind of decided to look up like what courses I could do, because I knew I wasn't going back to computing, even though my parents wanted me to. But I think they were just happy that I was happy. So I was looking up stuff, and I had a choice between. I was looking up radiography, and when you look at all the avenues in that, there's like many different jobs, many different aspects to it that you can do, and it's both working with patients and technology. So it kind of combined the two things that I kind of love. So I'm also pretty geeky, so like getting to see all this, like all the different aspects of it, how it's built, all the physics and that is great. So through that, I kind of found diagnostic radiography at RGU. So I spent about 2 years at college getting all the qualifications I needed to get to here. So I think without getting sick, I wouldn't have found this and everything I needed.
That is, yeah, such a beautiful, powerful, wonderful story. Aiden and I are both medical students, and we kind of like knew we were doing medicine before we got diagnosed. But a lot of what you kind of say about, you know, knowing what patients are going through and knowing like what the, you know, like I was shadowing on an oncology ward recently and kind of like seeing a CT and seeing a mass and like actually knowing like kind of in your gut like what that feels like is so just like indescribable, isn't it? And you have that again, that like double layer of unique experience where like you've been the person with the cancer and the family member and now the healthcare professional.
I think it's kind of like that patient-centered care idea of like you can kind of you can switch it on and off to try and work out what works best for the person you're treating.
And our final section, Don't Laugh, looks at the funnier sides of cancer.
So if we're talking about a few stories, mine is a two-parter. So I guess it starts back to when within the 4 days between me getting diagnosed and receiving chemo, I had to go get fertility, like not treatment. I had to get produce a sample, you know, in case I want kids, which was fortunately successful. I've listened to the podcast a few times. There are people who weren't that lucky, which, you know, I should feel fortunate. At that point, I was kind of too sore to drive, so I had the awkward job of asking my dad to take me. So yeah, you're kind of just sitting there but in the car, yeah, my dad's gonna be in the same vicinity while I'm wanking, so that'll be great. So yeah, so we went into the waiting room, like in between me having to produce it, and there was a few same-sex couples, and my dad's fear was that we were going to look like a same-sex couple. So he was like, right, because there's about 30 years between us, and he was like, yeah, it's going to look like I'm just walking in here with my toy boy. So it was that was kind of his worry. So so after I did the sample and that afterwards, we went home, and then it kind of leads into the second part where, so while I was getting chemo, I remember my dad was in the room and I was there, and I was watching, what was it, Chronicles of Riddick? It's like a film, yeah, which I fell asleep during, and my dad had to get home at that point, and I think he saw the point of getting his vengeance, so he changed the channel to, I think it was Channel 4, which, if people don't know what comes on at about 9 or 10 o'clock at Channel 4, it's a show called Naked Attraction. So Naked Attraction, I don't know if I have to explain what Naked Attraction is, but it's pretty much a dating show where people get naked and then they have to judge it based on looks. So my dad decided, I don't know if he was being honest about this, but he told me, I only found this out recently, that he decided to change the channel and then leave to go home. So here's me waking up, seeing my dad gone, me in the bed by myself, topless, and a nurse walking in with me watching Naked Attraction. So yeah, I think she did relieve the tension. She was like, oh yeah, I'd pick the blue one. But like, other than that, it was kind of just, yeah. Kind of one of those moments where you're like, God.
I love that she had her 2 pennies for 2 pennies, 5 cents of thoughts. That is amazing from your dad. Wow, what a prankster. You've got to respect it.
I only found out the other week when I mentioned it to him. I was like, it was that time. He was like, what are you going to say for like the funny part of this podcast? And I was like, well, probably the time I woke up Naked Attraction. I went, oh yeah, I did that. I went, what? Like, yeah, I changed the channel while I was leaving.
I'm surprised that he managed to keep that a secret for so long. Because if I did that to someone, I am claiming that as soon as it happened. Wow, what a perfect story. And I think a really, really perfect way to end the episode. So, Connor, thank you very, very much for coming on.
See you guys later. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
And there we have it. Another episode of AfterThoughts. And again, what an episode. I mean, Connor, just full of stories. It made life easy, didn't it, Shaumya?
I thought he was amazing. Just super easy to listen to and chat to, and I can't wait for the listeners to have heard this one too.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved his story with his grandpa. That was just, could have
Really
made me
touched the
shed a tear.
heartstrings.
Exactly, I know. It's just what an awful situation, but also just what an amazing sort of way to go about it, and then an amazing ending.
Yeah, absolutely. Brought a tear to one's eye, you might say.
Yeah, I'm glad the listeners won't get to hear the moment I was muted while I spoke to Connor, and lasted about maybe 45 seconds of me being on mute. So for the listeners, I did that.
You've brought it up now, so Toby can leave it in the edit.
I feel Shaumya would have wanted me to include that, and maybe Connor as well, because they all really enjoyed that mess up from me. So hopefully I'll bring them a bit of joy. But Shaumya, what are your afterthoughts on Afterthoughts today?
Well, I just thought my main afterthought was that cancer buddies can take all kinds of forms, and obviously you and I are cancer buddies. Alice and Toby are cancer buddies. We're now all cancer buddies. But I just thought it was, such a unique and special situation that Connor ended up in. And obviously, as we say, completely awful. And for both of them, I'm sure they wish it had never happened. But there's just something really beautiful about the fact that him and his granddad could help each other. So that was really special to listen to. What are your afterthoughts on this episode of Afterthoughts, Aiden?
I think my afterthoughts was the importance of sort of keeping cancer sometimes, especially when you're going through it, a little bit lighthearted. I think, throughout the podcast today, we sort of refrained from using words like lucky and things like that. But, Connor went for the sort of career change, which I think has done him a world of good. The lighthearted cancer top trumps with his granddad. It's just incredible. And I think, looking at those bright moments, I think is just more important than ever.
I was going to say, I think, for me, the bit where Connor said he was like, I don't want to say, luckily I got cancer, but, luckily I got cancer. I think that's a feeling that a lot of us really relate to. But I think just really kind of sums up that he's taken the best from, what has been a really rough ride for him. So, yeah, I'm really just proud of him, where he's going to go in life and all those people he's going to scam.
Yeah, I might hit him up for help with how to read scans, because I really struggle with that right now. And with exams coming, that's just not getting any better. But that is all for today's episode of Afterthoughts. So this is Aiden signing out.
This is Shaumya signing out. Take care, everyone.
Bye. If today's episode of Afterthoughts has brought up any thoughts or feelings that you'd like to speak to someone about, we really recommend catching up with a friend or dropping them a message. There are a whole host of charities out there if you've experienced cancer and want to get some extra support.
Thanks so much to Teenage Cancer Trust for supporting Afterthoughts the teenage years. Supporting teens and young adults diagnosed with cancer in the UK, the work they do is incredible. Find out more at teenagecancertrust.org and check out their socials. This series has been hosted by Aiden Grant and Shaumya Kularajan and produced by Alice May Purkis and Toby Peach from Beyond Arts. Sound design is by Dinah Mullen and Kieran Lucas.